Hi guys, I'm back again today with a very interesting topic. We have how socialists solved the housing crisis. I don't know if where this is exactly, like which part of the world. America's housing. Okay. So we have okay. We have like on screen, maybe you guys can see it yet, but it says housing America's housing crisis. So maybe we're going to talk about America specifically or the world, but this is a very interesting topic because my friend recently visited us here in the Philippines, and he moved back to Korea because he was studying here. He lived here for like 10 years. Then after college, he moved back to Korea because obviously like work there is better, like the pay there is so much better, the life there in general is so much better, but obviously he misses the Philippines and just how, like, Philippines is just relaxed and all that and cheap. So he was talking about the housing crisis there as well. It fluctuates like every second, and it's really hard to purchase a home because you don't know that if you're purchasing this 5 million home, in the future it will be 10 million or even 15 million. It's not like that in Korea. So it was is really hard for them to buy a home because the future is unknown in their economy when it comes to housing. Here in the Philippines, what I've noticed is it's like it rises, like houses, like real estate in general, a house, a lot, it what is that it increases. Ugh, even increase, I don't know the word. So it increases, right? It's not necessarily fluctuating, it could be like stagnant, but it doesn't dip, right? The house, like, so far from what I've noticed. But now this situation that is going on is scary because what if it happens to us too, right? Here in the Philippines. So like we already are really like having a hard time, and then if our real estate becomes like that, then we're all effed. So let's see, this is gonna be an interesting one. So thank you guys for joining, and before we do start, don't forget to subscribe, click the bell button, and let's get it. Let me know where you're from and how situation in the housing works.
American housing is in crisis. Right now, up to 12 million Americans are behind an average of $5,800 on rent and risk eviction. With eviction moratoriums soon to expire, we're facing an unprecedented wave of evictions and foreclosures that will crash straight into millions of struggling families.
Talking about foreclosure, right? I even took a picture. I don't know if it's this phone, but I took a lot of, when I went to the bank recently, I took a picture of the foreclosure properties in the Philippines, and it was like a thick, like it's a very thick file. I just took a picture of the city where I live in, so and I was looking through. Yeah, it's here. It's crazy. This is like my city. All the properties that are foreclosure in my city are here on this one page, but then this is like different places in the Philippines. My city, it's around, I think the maximum amount I saw here is 8.7, and then the minimum is around this is in pesos, so if you convert, it's gonna be super cheap for Americans and Europeans and all that. I think the cheapest one I saw is like a 300, let's say 400K, 400,000 pesos. And I was like, damn, I wish I had that money like liquidated, because that would be a great investment. But then yet again, we don't know. We need to talk to a financier because we don't know if it's gonna dip, or is the Filipino economy just rises when it comes to just like real estates. I mean, like housing lots or lots, does it ever dip? That's something that we need to study before we invest in such things. But it's like a very interesting niche for me, since the common thing about properties or like housing and houses and lots here is usually increasing. It never dips, right? But then I don't know in this recent times how it works anymore. I haven't necessarily like talked to anyone about it. So let's see. Are we affected by this somehow?
Across the country. But the truth is, this crisis didn't begin with the pandemic. In fact, housing has been in crisis for a very long time. Even before the pandemic, in places like New York or Los Angeles or San Francisco, median rents for even one-bedroom apartments could approach $2,500 a month or more.
25 a month. 150,000 pesos. I mean, like, if you want a normal life, or even above average life here in the Philippines, doable with that. That's monthly. You can get if I was to rent my house, our house, it's not mine, in the Philippines, a monthly, it will be probably $1,000 monthly. 1,000, and this is like, how many bedrooms? 4, 5, 8, 9 bedrooms. So in the Philippines, this is probably like the amount of this. Like, yes, in the Philippines we have like 9 bedrooms in the house. Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, but it's like equivalent to probably a 3-bedroom apartment in you guys' country. So don't be shocked, okay? So that's what I'm trying to say. Like, what the fudge? Because you can get a whole freaking house for 1,000 USD monthly compared to a freaking, what did he say, a studio type or a bedroom apartment. But obviously we have different the economy and all that shenanigans, but that's great.
Rents for even one-bedroom apartments could approach $2,500 a month or more. About a third of people in Los Angeles spend a majority of their income on housing. In New York City, about 20% of all renters pay most of their income to their landlord. And in my district, Astoria, about a quarter of residents have to spend most of their paycheck on rent. And the crisis isn't just in big cities. In 95% of all US counties, workers making the minimum don't make enough to afford a one-bedroom rental on their own. The Harvard Center for Housing Studies warns of a new normal for housing in the United States, in which nearly half of all renter households spend almost a third of their income on rent. That's why even before the fallout from the coronavirus started to hit, more than 500,000 Americans nationwide were already homeless, millions more on the brink of losing their housing, and countless families struggling every month to make ends meet. At the root of all of this suffering is the fact that in this country, housing is treated as a commodity, not a right. It's a consumer product, just like clothes or cars, that private businesses can sell on the market to make a profit. And if someone isn't able to pay, either because their landlord raised their rent or because they can't work for one reason or another, they're not able to stay in their homes. If they're lucky, they can live with friends or family, or maybe in transitional housing for a bit. But for a lot of people, they have nowhere else to go, and they end up sleeping on the streets. In December 2019, the number of people sleeping in homeless shelters in New York reached 19,000 people, an all-time high. 100,000 New York City students are homeless. That's more than 10% of the entire student population. Why do so many people end up homeless? It's not because there aren't enough homes to go around. There are plenty of empty homes. No, it's because housing people is not the primary goal of developers or landlords. Their goal, simply put, is to make a profit. And it's much more profitable to build luxury apartments for the rich than decent homes for the poor. This gives us a big shortage of homes for ordinary working people. For every 100 households that are extremely low income, there are only 36 affordable and available homes. As a result, we have plenty of housing for the rich, but poor and working class people don't have nearly enough on the market. So we have people scrounging to make ends meet or sleeping on the streets right below luxury condos and uninhabited apartments. This is a terrible way to organize a housing market. It might be profitable for landlords and developers, but it's not efficient or beneficial for the rest of society. In fact, housing doesn't have to be seen as a market at all. In other countries, housing is considered a fundamental right, like education or healthcare. That means the government goes to significant lengths to guarantee everyone has a home, and the market plays a much smaller role in the construction and
I
distribution of
remember,
housing.
was it Sweden?
So let's hop across the pond and about 100 years back in time to take a look at just one example of how an alternative housing model got started in beautiful red Vienna. At the end of the First World War, the
Austria.
Austro-Hungarian Empire collapsed, leaving behind a number of successor states, including modern-day Austria, home to the former imperial capital of Vienna, the fifth largest city in the world. Despite being the seat of an empire, the chaos of the war and decades of neglect had left the working class of Vienna in desperate circumstances. Inflation was rampant, jobs were scarce, social services were non-existent, and hundreds of thousands of people were crammed into decaying tenements where overcrowding, disease, and violence were rampant. So it's no surprise that in 1919, at the first elections ever held in Austria where all adult citizens could vote, the Social Democratic Party swept into power at the municipal level on the promise of dramatic social and economic reform. And they delivered. The new government of Vienna implemented a huge range of services, including public health care and public child care. They built high-quality hospitals, schools, and recreational facilities. But their crowning achievement was an ambitious program of social housing, what Americans call public housing, that began in 1923 and saw 60,000 new apartments constructed in the first year of its existence, built by the government and financed by taxes on the rich. But these weren't the kinds of apartments you might picture when you think of public housing financed by taxes on the rich.
Karl Marx. Okay. This was one of my high school research paper on Marx. Yeah, it's a controversial research paper. I don't know, maybe it's in the trash somewhere. I have to like read it again because my brain at this age compared to that age, and I don't even think I actually understood what was happening exactly and what I was writing about, but I would love to like read it, the research that I did, just to see what I said. Might be
But these weren't the
controversial, I don't
kinds of
know.
apartments you might picture when you think of public housing in the United States. Drab high-rises plagued by chronic neglect and underinvestment. Residents could enjoy leafy courtyards, wide open spaces, and plenty of natural light. They had shared laundries, state-of-the-art kitchens, food co-ops, bathhouses, pharmacies, lecture halls, schools, and swimming pools. These apartments were designed to be both beautiful to look at and beautiful to live in, fostering a sense of shared community among the
It's
people
like
who
a
lived there.
condominium.
And the best part was that because the city didn't have to worry about making a profit, just about paying off their maintenance costs, these homes were both much nicer and much cheaper than what workers had previously known. In 1926, the average rent in Viennese social housing was about just 4% of a monthly wage. The first 15 years after Austrian independence saw its capital transform from a symbol of urban blight into a beacon of socialist governance. It became known as Red Vienna, after the official color of the socialists who had pioneered these changes. And even though Red Vienna fell in 1934 when the country was seized by fascists, who did what they could to roll back social housing, that commitment to good, cheap housing remained after the Second World War. Today, an astonishing 62% of all city residents live in social housing, with the average monthly rent falling somewhere between $400 and $600 a month, with subsidies for lower-income tenants. That is a fraction of what people in America pay. Unlike in the United States, where public housing is treated as a worst-case way to house the very poor, Vienna's social housing residents are extremely diverse. Everyone except the top fifth of the population is eligible to live in social
Yeah,
housing.
like 400 to 600 USD is how do you call it? Is 400 is how much is that? 100 is 5. So that is like 20K. Yeah, 20K you could get for rent if it's renting. You could get probably like a 4 bedroom, or even a family house, like a whole house to yourself to rent for 400 to 600 USD monthly. You could get a whole house to yourself with like a parking lot even, right? Yes, some condominiums are around those prices, apartments around those prices as well, 3 to 4 bedrooms easily. So that's really good. So I feel like the Filipino market is more like in terms of rent, it's more of like the European or European I don't know if it's the whole Europe, but how they're describing it right now is similar. Maybe that's why our market in terms of like housing never like fluctuates crazily, or it never dips that bad, is because the renting is supposedly like it's average. It's like it's okay. People can do it. It's not ridiculous, right? It's not ridiculous.
This means there's broad appeal across many segments of society, which creates the foundation for its political popularity. That is how the majority of people in Vienna enjoy something that's considered almost utopian here in New York. Affordable housing that isn't just cheap, but desirable. Housing that isn't just four walls and a roof, but a real home, with a sense of stability, safety, and community built in. Now, of course, this is only one example of an alternative framework for housing, and Vienna has not fully removed housing from the domain of the market. Residents still pay part of their earnings in rent to cover operational costs, and a sizable chunk of the population lives in private housing. But it's an actually existing alternative that shows us what a step toward a better world could look like. If we want to end the housing crisis, the solution has to be moving toward the full decommodification of housing. In other words, moving away from the status quo, in which most people access housing by purchasing it on the market, and toward a future where we guarantee high-quality housing to all as a human right. So how can we do it? We can start by making sure people who access housing on the private market have ironclad protections against abuse and exploitation. But to go further, toward the Vienna model, we'll have to go beyond the market. We can establish community land trusts to gradually buy up housing on the private market and convert it to community ownership. We can give tenants a right of first refusal to buy out their landlords when buildings go up for sale. And we can fully commit to a new era of social housing, ending subsidies for luxury housing development and using our wealth to build beautiful, high-quality social housing projects that offer good homes and strong communities to everyone. We won't decommodify housing overnight, but we know what we have to do, and we have history to guide us. And we know how we'll get there, through a movement of the multiracial working class organizing for the better world we know is possible. And we've already begun. I'm Zohran Mamdani, Assemblyman for New York's 36th Assembly District in Astoria, Queens, for the Gravel Institute.
Okay. That was interesting to see like the difference in, let's say, New York, where he gave us an example of, and then Vienna, right? It's like just the difference. It's a very crazy difference, right? You would think, oh, it's different by this and that, but it's so like the difference is just so crazy. But anyways, yeah, I hope that US like figure shenanigans out in Korea as well. um because then the youths are not being able to like settle down, and this goes into the problem of like why people are not getting married, and why the generation, like humanity, is just dying down because nobody wants to get married and have kids anymore. And we also talked about that Korea is now like the country of like less, like there are more, it was Japan before, like there are more older people than younger people. And like I forget the percentage he gave us, but he was like, there's a this percentage of people that only get married, and the rest of the population is just like don't want to get married anymore or have kids. So yeah, maybe we're just gonna kill our own selves. Like if we're not doing it by war, we're doing it by just not populating the world anymore, so we just go extinct. But anyways, that was fascinating. Let me know your 2 cents. So, if you have some input, you want to like give some clarification in some aspects also, let me know down in the comments. If you have some beautiful inputs that you want to add, let me know down in the comments so that we can, go back and forth and have a discussion. That would be very interesting to see the differences in perspectives, and also the difference kind of like market in terms of housing in different parts of the world. That would be very, very fascinating. So thank you guys for joining, and I will see you then. Bye.